Hi, this is Roger, thanks for dropping by. Today I thought we'd have a go at this. These, rather than this, these are my Dendrobium victoria-reginae. And this one I've had a while and it won't grow roots. It's been in a pot, with different media, it's been on a mount and it still has not grown any new roots. It just won't do it. This kiki up here, the one that's still actively growing, starts here. So I even put some moss on the mount around the base of that kiki. I thought if we can get some roots on that, at least I've still got a plant with roots. No roots. So this plant has no viable roots, quite honestly. These ones down here in the moss are dead. They're no good. And it hasn't grown any new ones, so what it's surviving on I really don't know, but it just won't grow. It has grown new canes in the past, in its early days. Anyway, so that's that one, that's what I've got. And then I bought this at the Bournemouth show from Burnham's, which is one of their own, so this is one that they've produced seed and grown on as young plants. It's in a pot, but it isn't really. I'll show you what I mean. Or at least it's got some roots. I'm well pleased. What I mean by it's not in the pot is that the kikis, which are the ones with the most leaves on, are starting from higher than the media, and the roots at the moment are aerial. But this has roots. Now I'm very surprised. It's growing in a sort of peat, by the looks of it, which is not like Burnham's at all. They chuck everything in bark, basically. So the original base of the plant does have some roots. These are viable. There's even an odd root with a growing tip, and up here there are quite a few roots with growing tips. So the plant is actively growing. It's got a cane against it, that was to hold it upright. Let's get that off. So I'm beginning to wonder whether this is one of Burnham's own or whether they bought it in. I've never seen them tie a stake with string. But anyway, that should release the cane. So there's a root grown through this piece of string. So the piece of string is surrounded by a root. Oh, let's leave it there. It's not doing any harm, is it? Right, so we should now be able to get the stake out. Yes, there we go. And then we've got a clip near the top. Take that off as well. Keep that. Right, so this is what we've got. Now, this is two plants. This bit here looks like it's very difficult to tell. It is, this cane here, this old cane, is actually part of the main plant. The kiki is the one with all the roots. And this is fragile, this is unlikely to survive actually. And then this one, again, the one with all the leaves and a few roots, is growing off the stem of the old plant. The old plant has roots, so potentially it could produce a new growth. So what am I going to do with this then? It's going on that existing mount, and I think that's the easiest thing to do, is to just mount it as it is, get these roots higher up with a growing tip into some moss, and get this lower part with the active roots into some moss. There are some old dead roots on here. These are all papery. Let's get these off straight away because we don't want to mount it with those. We'll just snip those off, those old papery ones. And there we go. Right, so what we've got now is one plant that's split into two. The main cane has been chopped off and it now has a kiki, that's all it has. The other side has a very, very weak cane, but it has a kiki that's grown off of that cane that has some roots. So that's what we're dealing with. Now what I was hoping to do was mount it halfway up this mount, so that I'm not disturbing the plant that's on there and I'm just adding to what we've already got, and there's room between this moss and that moss in that groove to set this up. So that's what I'm going to do. So I will need to, I've got a bit of moss here in soak. I don't want this in a lot of moss. You read about this and you get conflicting ideas. The place where I get most of my information, or albeit brief, it's normally accurate, is off the Orchid Encyclopedia, the one I've been using for donkey's years. And that basically says that this grows in shady woods, always on trees, always with its roots in moss, and those woods contain rhododendrons and azaleas and oaks, which implies that the soil base is acidic, otherwise there wouldn't be azaleas and rhododendrons. But does that mean that the oaks are? Bearing in mind it's an epiphyte, so it would be growing in the moss, on the bark, on the trees. Does that mean it needs an acidic base? You have to bear in mind that any epiphyte that's growing on trees, it's difficult to be acidic because it gets rained on. And unless you live in an industrial area, when going back to the old days of acid rain, rain is not acidic. It's slightly acidic rather than slightly alkaline. So it's below 7, but it's certainly not below 6. Now as it washes down the trees, it could change its pH, but not much, I wouldn't have thought. So, and then in other places you read about this and it needs a dry winter rest. And then in other places you read needs to be constantly moist. Well, make up your minds, one or the other. Now that could be temperature dependent. So if you're growing, if it's growing in a warmer environment, then maybe it would keep growing and would need to be constantly moist. However, if you're growing in an environment where it's much lower temperatures, especially during the winter, then it may well need a winter rest. So it's difficult to work out exactly what this thing wants. Very difficult. But most places say that if you're going to grow it in a pot, it could do with being in a basket with plenty of ventilation and in a media that's very well drained, which implies it doesn't like to stay wet. Other places say it grows best on a cork or piece of cork mount, cork bark, or a piece of wood. If it was an import, it would be on a piece of plastic with holes in. You've seen those, right? So that's what I'm dealing with. Now I've got some wire, I've got my wire cutters, got my scissors, which I've recently cleaned up because they were getting a bit manky, and sharpened and put a bit of oil on so that they actually move. They were getting to the point where I was opening them to cut something and they wouldn't close because they were so stiff. But they're all nice and lubricated now. So right, so that I think is what I'm going to do. I really would like to get that bit of string off, but I don't want to damage the roots that are growing through it. almost as though it's got a knot on it. Gotcha. I just wanted to see that off, really. Right, so we've got growing root tips that have been in media. They therefore shouldn't stall because this is a very fibrous thing. As I say, it almost looks like some form of seedling mix or a terrestrial mix even almost. But anyway, he says wiping his dirty hands on his jeans. I need to change my jeans, these are quite grubby. So that's what I'm going to do, that is going to go there. And then some of these lower roots can tuck in behind that wire and may push down into the moss that's already there. The other roots, these top roots up here, they may grow into that moss that's already there. If not, they're going to grow into the new moss that I'm about to put on there. And this moss does not want to be soaking wet, so we will bring it out. I haven't got much here, I might have to get some more. I don't want these roots in a lot of moss. I just think that the reason this hasn't got roots is that at some point in its life, probably with me, it's been too wet, and that's what's done it in. So what I've done is I've lined that crevice on the mount with moss. So I've now joined up this top bit of moss, which still hasn't got any roots in, to the bottom bit of moss. So there's now moss right up that crevice. And then this, the majority of the roots with the tips on, I'm going to go round the back like that. Do I put some moss over the top, or do I just see with the lower plant? With the lower plant, a lot of those root tips are on the moss. They will grow into it and hopefully attach to the bark. If I leave these roots bare, certainly with the amount of water it's going to get in the winter, they're probably going to dry out. So I think I ought to put a bit more moss on. And at the moment I haven't got any wet moss. If you try and add dry moss out of the bag, basically you'll have a job to get it wet. It's reluctant to wet when it's bone dry. Once it's used and it's used to getting wet and then drying off a bit, it's not so bad. Now we do have some RO water over here, sitting here doing nothing. I had the RO unit on yesterday and made a bit too much, so the bucket that I produce it in has still got some in that I run out of containers because I had a bit too much. I topped up the Saracena tray, I changed the Disa trays, changed the water in the bird bath. I still had, oh, and I watered a couple of bonsai. I still had some left over. I was busy and forgot the RO unit that was on. That's what actually happened. Right. So we will now get some wire and wire that in place. Then we'll worry about putting a bit of moss over the top. But it's not getting much. This is not my thinnest wire, it's the sort of next grade up. So it's 1.5, is it? Yeah, 1.5 mil. So it's quite firm, but still very flexible. The one below it is very flexible, but it's quite easy to break. It is so thin, the 1 mil. And the 2mm just getting a bit heavy. So I don't use that very often. But if I'm wiring up something big, you know, a large mount or something like that, I'd go up to 3mm. You know, if I want something to really hold in place. Right. So what I'm doing now is I'm holding this plant where I want it to be. That's all I'm going to do. So I'm going to need one there where my thumb is and one here where my thumb is. Yeah, some of these roots have even got little branches on, so we'll put that round there. That will be for fixing in a minute. In fact, I'm going to come in behind these canes and then go over the roots. We'll hold it a bit firmer. Let me just go around the back there. So that's the bottom of the plant held. Of course, a long way around the top. Then we come up here and I'm going to get those canes where I want them, like that. And then I'm going to go around all of them because I don't want that part of the plant held tight. It doesn't need to be tight. And then we'll come back round and we'll go over the middle part of the plant, having added a bit of moss. As I'm only going to go over that part of the plant once, and I don't want much. I just want a very loose covering. That's all it's going to get, just that little. I like to think of the fact that it can see daylight. You can see daylight through that moss, so it's not dense. So that's that. Now we come round and we've got to do the same down the bottoms. You know, I might get away with this one piece of wire and do the whole lot. Let me just put that down so that I can. Now, that's a broken root. I'm going to turn that root up the other way. Oh, it's broken anyway, so I'll take that one off. That one's got a lovely root tip on it, so I'm going to tuck that in there. Again, root tips, tuck them in if you can without breaking them. Then we'll have a bit more root, bit more roots, a bit more moss. And again, very light moss, just a covering, not too much at all. So that's that. Dry my hands, I hate working with wet hands. And then come back quick because that bit of moss is going to fall off, like the towel just has. There we go, right. Now back round here. All we're doing really now, because the plant's already held, all we're doing really is holding the moss now. So we can go under that cane again like we did before. Come back round, a bit lower down. And then finally a bit lower down again. And that's it. I'm happy with that. Turn round, find our loose end, do a bit of twisting. Not that sort. I don't do dancing, I haven't done that for donkey's years. You always get somebody at a wedding or something like that where there's a disco, which I despise. And you always get somebody grabs hold of you and insists on you going up onto the dance floor. There's two ways you can handle that. You can break their fingers, or you can get up and make a complete idiot of yourself and embarrass them so much that they walk away. Then you can go back and sit down and finish a drink. So there's several ways of handling it. I don't see any point in it. It does nothing for me. It never has. I just think it's I prefer, if the music's good, to listen to the music. And if it's live music, I wouldn't dream of jigging around. because I want to listen to it. Right, so it's done. Whether that's going to take off or not, who knows? But at least it's got a good start. At least it has roots, which is more than the other plant has. But between the two of the plants at the moment, it looks an awful lot better, doesn't it? I wish I'd got that under that piece of wire. Still, never mind. I'm certainly not unwiring it all to tuck a cane in. So there we go. As I said, these roots down here are useless, and that's what's off the old plant, and it hasn't grown any new roots despite being in what I'd consider better conditions. So let's see if this new piece takes off. And again, what I'd really like to see is a new growth from the base. And I'd like to see roots on that kiki on the old plant as well, but I'm not going to hold my breath. Anyway, there we go, playing around. So that was a new Dendrobium victoria-reginae added to one that I already had, that I've had some considerable time. And quite honestly, that was set back when I moved around here. And ever since then, it's just not grown. It doesn't want to get going. And you get plants that do that sometimes, orchids, where they haven't given up. Otherwise the leaves would drop and they'd just rot away. But they're not growing. They're just stalled, I think is the best way of calling it. And it would take off, it would get going again if it was in ideal conditions. And it's difficult to find out what they are, because there's a lot of contradiction around with this. An awful lot. Now I know how Burnham's grow theirs. They've got them in big baskets, but they're all big specimen plants. And you saw how this little one was being dealt with, and that had some good roots going on. So that little plant wasn't doing bad in this mix. It's contrary to most of what you'd read. That's not the sort of thing you would normally grow an epiphyte in. As I say, that's more like a terrestrial mix. And I haven't found anywhere that says that it can be terrestrial. Everywhere that I've read basically says it's an epiphyte and it grows on trees with its roots in moss. That bit seems reasonably consistent. Well, it's on a tree and its roots are in moss. So let's see if it gets going. And starting off with a newer plant with some roots, this is a cool grower. Cool to cold grower in some places, but certainly a cool grower. So maybe with a new plant in these conditions, it may now grow on. We shall see. Anyway, thanks for dropping by and all that sort of stuff. Don't forget your hypes. Don't forget to use your hypes. And if you're not subscribed, it would be nice if you did that as well. And don't forget the old thumbs up. And watching the videos is great. All these things help channels along. Not just mine, anybody else you watch as well. These are the little things. Watching the ads when they pop up, or some of them. Doing the thumbs up. Leaving a comment. All this stuff helps your channels along, the ones you like to watch. Including mine, I hope. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.